Could you turn the lights down a bit? I think the pictures would show better that way. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
This introduction to Chuck's speech is going to be a big challenge for him, and I hope he's up to it. I really do. So I'll start by saying that the famous Socrates quote is, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And so what Chuck is going to do is he is going to give us a heavily examined life, his own life. A life that is about, not just, it is not the life about the work that he has done, about his professional life. It's really about his moral and ethical and spiritual life. And knowing Chuck as I do, I think that this is a very important thing because there's a lot of depth in here. So all I have to say is that, and this is the hard part for Chuck, he will not be skipping over the hard stuff. He will not be overplaying the virtuous stuff. Today, we will get the real stuff, not the sugar-coated stuff from someone for whom honesty and humility really means something. So please listen to Chuck. Chuck Herbruck.
Thank you very much, Joe Coyle. I don't know if you're getting the honest story or not, but actually I have some family here and some friends here that can confirm or deny some of it. Thank you all for coming. Your support is meaningful to me, and not only this afternoon, but each and every day that we live together here. And have all my life, and I'll get into some of it. I'm not going to quiver the whole time. I may have trouble with my eyes. Okay, I'm reading most of it, and then some of it I'm ad-libbing, and that's the part that's going to be dangerous. In writing out this presentation, I've identified several themes that run through my life, and I'm going to tell you stories that illustrate them. These themes are: live life in the present and enjoy every moment. Be kind to everyone. Be kind. There's some things on the back table. That has this, in case anyone wants to pick it up. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. It's really important. Be grateful and pass your joy on to others. Seek a meaningful relationship with our Creator. Okay. I was born at McDonald House right across the street at University Hospitals on March 1st, 1946. I am 78 years old. My parents were Lois Leavenworth of Cleveland and Charles Herbruck of North Canton, Ohio. When I was born, my father leaned over my mother's bed and said, "Don't worry, dear, we'll adopt a girl." I was meant to be a girl. I have 3 brothers, 2 older and 1 younger. 2 live in Cleveland, and the 3rd brother lives in Boulder, Colorado. I was baptized at St. Paul's. Aren't these pictures great? I mean, they're mostly of me. I was baptized at St. Paul's Church in Cleveland Heights, Ohio on July 21st, 1946. I mention this because as I thought about this presentation in my life, I realized it was getting to be about my spiritual journey and my journey towards God and where I am in that journey at Judson. And St. Paul's was an important part of my life and part of my journey. And of course, my parents were also. I went to church every Sunday, sang in the children's choir, sort of. Went to confirmation classes, was involved in the Boy Scouts, and at St. Paul's I was an acolyte. For the majority of my life, I worried a lot, and my mother was constantly nurturing me. She must have known the Sermon on the Mount by heart. To Chucky the Worrier, she would say, "Consider the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin." To the child fighting with his brothers, she would say, "If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. Love your enemy." Well, my father would say, "I don't care who started the fight. I want to know who ended it." And he said, "Always be kind." He would also say frequently, "I've always let life come to me." I personally always thought this expression he used was passive and not aggressive enough. I believed one should make goals and meet those goals at any price, and rather than letting life come to you. As I have grown older, I have since thought of letting life come to me. These are my parents. Yeah. I had the most loving parents in the world, and we were a happy family most of the time. When I was 4 or 5 years old, my brothers and I, this is true. My brothers and I were all in the kitchen talking and playing while I was having a temper tantrum, which I was known to do. I was probably hungry, and my brothers referred to my tantrums as the blubber-nose stomp because I was slightly overweight at the time, and I had these tantrums with some frequency. Anyway, my mother, who was making dinner salad, turned and whack. She hit me over the head with a cucumber. And that splattered all over the kitchen. My brothers laughed. They thought it was great fun. There was too much drinking in our home. My mother could get unpredictable. My father could get stupid or silly. More about that later. We lived just up the hill on Woodmere Drive. For most of you know where that would be, off of Fairmount Boulevard. I went to Roxborough School through the 8th grade. I sat in the dumb row with Creighton, Wally, and Robert. I went back half a year in the 3rd grade. I was okay in some things like jump rope, marbles, and hopscotch. But I was weak in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Oh, this is my whole family. Isn't that something? That was taken up in Canada, I don't know, 1952 or 3. This trouble in school contributed to my low self-esteem. My mother worked constantly with me on my homework and tested me on vocabulary. She would say, "Chucky, spell fork." She said, "Sound it out." And I would start and I'd say, K-R, yeah. For me, learning was very difficult, which reinforced my feelings of low self-esteem. In the summer, isn't that a cool picture? We would go to our cottage in Muskoka. I'm the one with the head in the window. Our cottage in Muskoka, Canada, on an island on Lake Rosso. My father worked for the Lincoln Electric Company. Every August, Lincoln would shut down for 2 weeks, and we would drive up in our station wagon. Interstate 90 was not built yet, so we would drive along the shores of Lake Erie on Route 20. One year we stopped near Erie, Pennsylvania to get gas. While we were there, I had a tantrum. I wanted a Baby Ruth candy bar. I ran east towards Buffalo, New York, and sat under a maple tree. Thank you, Karen. Oh, and I lost my place. A couple minutes later, the car drove by, and someone threw a candy bar out the window. I panicked. My brothers claimed, or my mother claimed I was scarred for life, and perhaps I was. However, my brothers thought it was great fun. Our cottage had no running water in those early years, and no fridge. We had an ice house, and that's that little yellow house. And the other one, the open place, is our tea house. We had an ice house, and our caretaker would cut out ice in the lake in the winter. We had an outhouse.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little yellow building out back, and we called it the Little House. This isn't a picture of it. This is a picture of our outdoor shower, and we called it Frogmore. We built a second outhouse later and called it Toad Hall, like the wind in the willows. I mention this all because my mother stocked the Little House with Reader's Digest. I was only 12 years old when one day I read one of the articles that my mother had marked. It was called Riley's Route to the Eternal Life, the Eternal Now, excuse me. This is the first time the concept of living in the present was impressed upon me. And I'm going to read just a little bit of that article. This is going to be tricky. I guess if I was 12, we're up to 1956 or so, and the Reader's Digest wasn't this size. After many years, and the author's a guy named Amos. After many years in New York and Europe, I was back in the Plains State visiting my cousin Riley on the farm he had never left. We walked through the fields. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. You know, part of my nose problem is my Lewy body, and that's the truth. We walked through the fields and sat on a log. Alert, amused, Riley whittled on a stick as I told stories of London, Paris, and Madrid. The leaves of the cottonwoods chipped in the summer breeze. A redbird called its notes so clear they seemed to split the air. I forgot my story and listened to the leaves and the bird, and felt the same inexplicable happiness I'd felt a lifetime ago on this same farm. I was 15 then. Riley was 20. Riley wanted to get the plowing done and was working, all night. I just learned to drive the tractor and was eager to help. We took turns plowing and sleeping in the haystack. The hired girl would bring us coffee and sandwiches at midnight. When I woke at 11, this is crazy. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble. When I woke at 11:30, the three-quarter moon had risen. The tractor droned powerfully in the night, eating away into the furrows. At the end of a row, Riley would jump down and hold a book in the light for half a minute. He was memorizing a poem, something by Walt Whitman. As I watched this scene, some strange sort of light seemed to turn on for me. I saw the moon, the tractor, the field, the trees, the house, the haystack, as if from all sides. It was a beautiful, it's not me, it's the paper. It was beautiful and magic. I hated to breathe, at least I changed one thing. Then I seemed to stop, and I wanted never to start again. And now, sitting on that log many years later, I felt the same ineffable happiness. I heard the bird, the leaves. I was in the scene. I was part of it. I tried to explain it to Riley, but knew I couldn't. I recalled the tractor, the moonlight. I was there. I said the moon was there. Oh, it was hopeless trying to put it into words. But Riley nodded and smiled. I realized something. Riley knew all about that magic. He had experienced it often. You know the secret, I said. What is it? Riley smiled and put aside his whittling. No one can explain it, he said. Oh, I've found hints in many of the books I've read, but first I felt it just as you did, and so did the men who tried to write about it. They felt it independently, separated by oceans and centuries, yet they all, I'm just having a terrible time. Yet they all shared the same experience. But what is it? If I put it in one sentence, Riley went on, I would say, full consciousness brings joy. One of the mysteries is the universe contains innate joy. Once you fully open your senses to anything, a sunset, a waterfall, a blade of grass, the joy comes. That's so much for that one. That was I was 12, maybe 10, maybe 13, I don't know, but it was a long time ago. I don't know where I left off. Oh, this is the first time the concept of living in the present was impressed upon me. High school. For high school, I went to university school in Shaker Heights, a preparatory day school. I think I learned more there than I did in college. Again, I was very aware of my learning disability. They posted class standings in those early years, and in the first year that I was there, out of 64 boys in the class, I was ranked number 64. It was suggested that I drop out, but with a little pleading, I was allowed to continue. I went to summer school every year, and most Saturdays I received extra help. I did excel in wrestling. Now that might be challenged, but it's my story. I had to drop out, though, when I injured my back. I remember in Chilton Thompson's 10th grade English class, we read Thornton Wilder's Our Town out loud in class. I hope you have all read this play or seen it. It's beautiful. I was given the privilege of reading the part of the main character, Emily Webb. During a scene within the play, Emily dies and comes back to Earth to witness her 16th birthday at a breakfast setting. She is extremely aware of the present. Emily expresses the following. I can't go on. I can't go on. It all goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. On Earth, you are too wonderful for anybody to realize you. Do any human beings realize life? They are living it while they're living it, every minute. The stage manager answers. A few people, the saints and the poets, they do some. You getting a theme here, folks? Yeah, good. Okay, college years, folks. We're moving along. After graduating from university school, I went to St. Lawrence University in Upper New York State, near the Seaway. In college, I majored in psychology and minored in religion. I truly desired to major in religion. However, my poor academic performance would not allow it. While studying religion as my minor, we focused on the Old Testament and New Testament, world religions and Eastern religions. I was shy around the women, but I'd had too much male exposure, growing up with 3 brothers and going to an all-boys school. But I did make 2 close friends at St. Lawrence. Bob, that's a picture of Bob, who is very dear to me. I made 2 at St. Lawrence. My roommate sophomore year, and Charlie, who I lived with my senior year. Even though I'm embarrassed to say, I was proud when Charlie asked me to live with him. It was my first exposure to a different world, to live with Charlie, because he was African American. He was he actually wasn't in school at the time. He had dropped out, but we lived together anyway. It just made it a little more difficult to get along. Yeah. I'm sorry. Darn Louis body. He was the lead singer in a band and introduced me soul music and late nights smoking marijuana. We lived in a farmhouse 10 miles from campus in the town of Morley, New York, with a population of 200. Charlie is the godfather, excuse me, of my son Christopher. And I'm the godfather of Bob's son. His name is Kurt. Okay, this gets better now. I need to emphasize one very significant episode during my college years. Somewhere between freshman and sophomore years, I went on an ambitious canoe trip with my immediate older brother, David, who was waiting to go to Vietnam with the Marines. He came back, and 2 friends. One was my best friend, David Webster. There's David. And the other was my friend, Frank Porter, from high school. My friend David Webster, otherwise known as Webby, and I had planned this trip for 4 years during high school and ending our senior year in college, our freshman year in college. We planned the trip would take 30 days. Having trouble seeing. 25 of the days would be paddling and 5 days for rest. Every 6th day we would take a break. As it turned out, we paddled for 39 days and only rested for 1. So much for our careful planning. We planned the food down to the last calorie. Can you believe it? 21,000 calories per week per man. But look at this, Karen. We took 2,700 calories of bacon. And that was about 20 pounds weight. The packs we carried were about 75, 80 pounds. And well, the reason bacon was so important is we took it because we needed the fat to fry fish.
Oh.
Yeah, wow.
Good job.
Yeah.
Peanut butter, of course.
There's a picture of us in the newspaper, and there's a copy back there. We planned. Oh God, this is the bad part. Here's the log I wrote. This is it. Whoopsie.
Hold on for a picture.
She just has to plug it back in.
What?
She's just gonna plug it back in.
How?
Keep going.
Oh.
You can keep going.
Oh, okay.
Can you see?
Here's the log I wrote. And this, I want to tell you, I hadn't looked at this in 50 years. And because I just, this is one of the few things I've saved from those years back. And I've edited my pages here so I wouldn't read too much. But I'm gonna still read too much. On June 21st, I write, we went to the ranger station and were discouraged by the ranger. He thinks the trip is too long and too much chance of getting lost. He told us that the Chippewa Indians on the Wollaston Lake were quite primitive and hostile to white men. He gave us our checkpoints and wished us luck. In fact, everyone we met in that town thought the trip was too long, and it probably was. I mean, we sort of ran out of food. On July 1st, we reached the river above Oliver Lake, late afternoon. Shot 2 unmarked rapids, and that was much fun. Now the maps we had were out of date. I'd gotten them from the Canadian Geological Survey Company, but they were issued in 1936, I believe. And well, this was, anyway, there have been some dams built, so. And I remember one day David said, because I had read some books, some journals, and I knew these damn maps were wrong. I'll tell you another funny story. David's married to a woman named Dozie, and before they got married, they dated. And I went down to meet them at Wells College one day, and I was showing Dozie the trip. And I said, we go up this river, and through this lake, and then up this river, and then up this river, and this river. And she said, why don't you go the other direction? Yeah, that's my learning disability. We reached the river above Oliver Lake late in the afternoon. Shot 2 unmarked rapids. Was much fun. Hit the first set of marked rapids, too difficult to shoot or portage at all, and we had to line down. Each canoe had a 50-foot line in it. And the way you got, in case you don't know, maybe some of you do, the sternman holds the line and lets the canoe float down the river, and the bowman takes his paddle and keeps pushing the bow out. You see, the river keeps wanting to push into the bank. And so, anyway, what happened was the water, I mean, we're talking about tough water, got in between the canoe and the shore, and I said, Webb and David lost the canoe about halfway down, and David was carried down the rapids with the canoe. The canoe swamped and our packs dumped. David recovered the 2 packs and canoe, and Webb went down the second set of rapids, and then the third set found the 3rd pack. Okay, get off that. That was July 1st. We lost not too much food, a little food. Here I write, this is July 4th. I hope I'm not too anxious. I try to live day by day and mile by mile. But I constantly am thinking about the future and the past. I think and hope most of this is due to all the extra time I have. Now, I talk an awful lot about rapids and portages in here, but you have to remember that we were paddling 8, 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day, and that's a lot of paddling, and it gives you a lot of time to think. I did a lot of praying. On July 5th, I write, paddled a short distance and took an extremely difficult portage. Narrow and muddy, almost killed me. Paddled another short distance and made camp. Webb and Dave took a nap, and Frank and I did a few chores, and I caught 3 fish for dinner, which made me feel good. I thought that was something else. I'm gonna skip that. There's some in here. We made 6 portages today, and most of them were winter roads, wide and well marked. There was, however, some swamp, and the last portage was mostly swamp. It was hell. I got trapped in the muskeg 3 times. What a frustrating and frantic feeling I had. I was helpless. I don't know, someone pulled me out. On this July 8th, it has been 8 days since we've seen a person or a boat. And here on July 9th, we woke at 4 o'clock in hope of beating the wind and making up lost time. We were off by 8:30. I guess that's 5:30. But it was a strong north wind already. Anyway, it was great. I'm going to stop there. I could go on. I did just talk the whole
Glad you
hour.
got back.
Yeah. There are some instances. What I did a lot of on that trip was I did a lot of praying, and that was nice. Okay, read log. I did that. Marriage years. After I graduated from college, I landed a sales job and was sent to Washington, D.C. I loved Washington, but after working there for 6 months, I was transferred to Toronto, Canada. While in Washington, I met Gretchen. We had a whirlwind romance. I was scheduled to leave Washington on Memorial Day weekend. She asked me what I was going to do over the holiday weekend. I said I was going home to Cleveland to see my parents. And she said, "Can I come with you?" With which I responded, "Let me ask my mother." Yeah, that's the way it was, folks. Thank you, Karen. Keep it up. She came for the weekend, and we were married that same September. We moved to Toronto, then to Boston, and then to Cleveland, where I started working with my father in a 2-man advertising agency. Gretchen and I started out in a 2-family house in Shaker, moved to a cottage on the lake in Bratenall, then bought a home on Tudor Drive, just up the hill near Woodmere, where I grew up. We had 2 sons together, Christopher, age 54, and Alex, age 52. They both live locally, and they're both here behaving themselves. Isn't that marvelous? They both went to Roxborough, as I did. I also have 4 grandchildren, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I'm a lucky man. Once again, St. Paul's was an important part during this time of my life. I taught Sunday school, I taught confirmation classes, I managed the acolytes, period. All my life, religion and spirituality has been a major focus. When I was 36, my life started to fall apart. My advertising agency was failing, and so was my marriage. The children were unhappy. I feel so bad for them. At this time, Gretchen was earning her MBA at Western Reserve University before it became Case. And while keeping her company as she studied in the library, I wrote a short novel. Very short. This is a little bit embarrassing, but anyway, I did write it, and I am going to read it. Not the whole thing. In the story, I come down to the kitchen, and on the television, the Today Show is playing. And the announcer says 4 girls were killed in an explosion that blasted through the 18th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama during the 10 o'clock Sunday morning service yesterday. Dozens of worshipers were injured by falling stones, timber, and flying glass. In the confusion and anger that followed, 2 more black youths were shot to death. So began the school year of 1963-64. It was the year that schools peacefully integrated throughout the South. The year Defense Secretary McNamara reported that the major part of the U.S. military task in Vietnam could be completed by the end of 1965. Yeah. President Kennedy set the goal to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. The year Kennedy was assassinated. The year Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton married. The Beatles made their first tour of the United States. The Alaskan earthquake measured 8.4 on the Richter scale. President Johnson launches his war on poverty. Ford Motor Company introduced the Mustang. Cassius Clay, a brash, little-known heavyweight, defeated Sonny Liston. It was the year California passed New York in wealth and in population. President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it was the year of the first of the long, hot summers. If you remember those, some of you do. In the year that I graduated from high school. That's sort of, it's coming of age that's what it was like at that time. And I'll read 2 more short things. Nikki was the heroine in this book. Nikki didn't speak right away. We walked a few minutes. I listened to the wind. Finally, she said, "It's a gorgeous night, but your fascination with it comes from your consciousness of it. It is easier to be enthralled with a romantic October evening than a drizzly November morning, but there is much life and beauty in the rainy November morning. We just seldom recognize it." Recognize that theme? Yeah. And here's the last part. This is all factual, as I say. It is fiction. It's sort of a contradiction, in case you didn't know. Martin Luther King came to Cleveland to meet with Negro leaders and speak at several inner city churches. He also spoke at St. Paul's. How or why that came about, I don't know, but he was there, Thursday at 2 o'clock on March 10th. Granger and I asked for the afternoon off and went to hear him. King talked about the American dream and said that it was part of a larger world brotherhood. No one can live alone, no nation can stand alone, and unless we learn to live together as brothers, we will perish together as fools. Until I am what you ought to be, you cannot fully be what you ought to be. And I cannot be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. King referred to John Donne, who preached a similar thought. Quotes, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, part of the main. Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." You know that one? Yeah. That's something I didn't include in this, but I will at the end, is the concept of non-dual consciousness. That's what that is.
We are all one.
One with each other and one with God. After I graduated from college, I landed this. No, that's where I met Gretchen. I'm sorry. When I was 36, my life started to fall apart.
Yeah, you already said that.
I did?
By age 40. You did. By age 40.
Mine says 36. Anyway, this is my family. And that's at Christmas time. And my mother is sitting there. She has a brain tumor.
Oh, dear.
This is in December, and she died in June. And this was her last time downstairs. But we look pretty good.
You look very good.
T,
Yes.
where am I? Why am I not here?
Right here.
Oh. By age 40, I had lost the advertising agency, was divorced, and my mother had died. I had a broken heart and a broken ego. Discovering the ego and the break in my ego was really important. It didn't happen really until many years later, but I think I think we blame things, I don't know. I had hit rock bottom. I had a doctor's appointment and asked the doc, "Do you think I'm an alcoholic?" To which he replied, "If you have to ask, you should look at it pretty seriously." Like I said, I had hit rock bottom, but I continued to drink excessively for another 10 years. Oh, yeah, I love this picture. I don't know why it's here. I don't know, some of you know this gentleman. His name is Walter Blodgett, and he was the organist at St. Paul's Church and the curator of music at the Cleveland Art Museum. And he started the first Muse Art program in the country. And Walter was a good friend of my parents and a good friend of us boys too. We'd drink with him. Walter said he taught me to drink my first martini, and that's not really true. I had been drinking way before Walter taught me. But anyway, and my brother Peter said Walter was the most cultured person we knew. He, like from mushrooms to Mozart. He knew, he was just very, very something. But the reason I have this picture, or part of the reason, you see the gentleman in the background? You know who that is? That's Chick Holtkamp. Karen's husband. Yeah, Chick was a good friend also. I worked for Chick for about 3 or 4 months when I flunked out of college. It was so sweet of him to give me a job. Following my divorce, I moved into a 3-room apartment above Nighttown. A restaurant and a bar just up the hill. Yeah, some of you know it. I'll tell you a story that my brother David has lunch with Brendan. Brendan Ring owned the restaurant. And my brother has a Friday lunch group, I guess, once a month. And oh, I like this piece. Anyway, David asked Brendan, he said, "Did you know Chuck Herbruck?" And Brendan said, "Chuck Herbruck, do I know?" He said, "When he stopped drinking, my restaurant almost went out of business." Yeah, that's true. Oh, the other thing I'll mention at this time, I have to thank my brothers so deeply. I'm so grateful for the help they gave me. I mean, I was down and out. I had all this loss. I was absolutely broke. I was alcoholic. Anyway, and they took me in, gave me a job, taught me how to sell, sort of. We kept running into Jim Bonebreak. We sold insurance. Anyway, that was awful. That was awful. Bonebreak was so... On Thursday afternoons, I volunteered at Rainbow Babies and Children's, holding infants on the 6th floor. After volunteering at the hospital, I would walk down the street to Severance Hall and usher at the 8 o'clock program. Isn't that lovely? On the weekends, I also volunteered with people infected with AIDS. It was a buddy program called Health Action Task Force. We were given the task of staying with someone that was infected with HIV until they passed. The group of volunteers became a very close-knit group. I was matched with a woman, and that's a story for another time. David could tell you a little bit about that. David Endozi, maybe. At night, before falling asleep while living above the bar, I read the spiritual canticle by the 14th century mystic, St. John of the Cross. Reading this, I became interested in the mystics. Now, Carl Jung, that's someone you recognize, he says, quote, "It is to the mystics that we owe what is best in humanity." One definition of a mystic is, quote, "a person who seeks by contemplation and self-surrender to obtain unity with the deity or the absolute." Another definition of mystic that is meaningful to me is, the mystic is the lover in us, the lover of self, the lover of God and the earth and being and life and the universe. They're all beautiful quotes or definitions. The path of studying the mystics has continued and does so today. It defines my journey seeking meaningful contact with my Creator, our Creator. And then I have a note here that says non-dual contemplation, or consciousness, but we're saving that to the end. I now have to tell you one last story about Nighttown. This is the story about Maria. And the theme of this story is, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Or that's the lesson, I guess I should say. Anyway, I lived about Nighttown. I'd been living there maybe 3 years. I was on the first floor, which is not the ground floor. There was a ground floor where the restaurant was, and then there's 3 floors above the restaurant. And I was on the first floor. And one night the doorbell rang, and I didn't even know at this time that I had a doorbell. Well, no one ever came to visit me, and I just never saw it. So anyway, I went down to answer the door, and there's this woman standing there. And we had this incoherent conversation. What are you doing there? Or doing here? And we went back and forth. And I finally said, "Would you like to come up?" And she said, "Sure." And then we got upstairs and we continued to have this incoherent conversation. As I said, "Why are you here?" And as it turned out, she had just moved out of the Alcazar. She had left her boyfriend. She had been, some man. I don't think it really was her boyfriend that she'd been living with. And so anyway, the long short of that is, I went up to we drove up up to the Alcazar Hotel. I don't know, it's right up the hill. And I paid for 2 or 3 rooms a night. And then you know what I did? I took her up to my father's house, but unannounced, and she lived there for 3 months.
Wow.
That was pretty nice.
Yeah, it was terrific. And Maria and I got to be pretty good friends. Not boyfriend and girlfriend, but she, we talked about religion. And I took her to St. Paul's to the 7:45 service, which is a very quiet service. There's no music, just prayers and communion. And we got out of the service, and I said, "Well, how'd you like it?" She said, "It sure was quiet." So the next week we go to her church,
And it's noisy.
and it was African American. It was all black, and it wasn't quiet at all. I was telling T the story, and she started to laugh, and it was a lovely experience. During my advertising career, I took a break for 3 summers in a row and went to Buffalo, New York, which is where I attended the Creative Problem Solving Institute. And this became known to my sons as Camp Sipsy. The staff of 200 was from a broad range of disciplines, such as religion, psychiatry, education, business, and the arts. Creativity and problem solving were facilitated in hundreds of sessions and in dozens of ways. One particular day, I studied symbolism and how to incorporate it in discernment. During the guided meditation, I had a vision of a large trunk or treasure chest tied up with rope. Inside this chest, there was a gift tied with a ribbon. Inside the gift box were two spheres, one dark and one light. And where they clashed together, there was a blue arc. With some help from the psychologist, I interpreted this symbol. The two opposing spheres were the yin and yang of my life. Where they collided, I felt peace and freedom. Freedom was the gift, tied inside the trunk, just waiting to be opened. I did not realize it at the time, but this was an accurate portrayal of my life. God loved me, wanted me to be free. My poor self-esteem and lack of confidence kept me in a dark place. And after, this is a day-long session, maybe 2 days, I don't remember. After going through the meditation and all the stuff, we created our symbols. We all made symbols in the class, and we created them in art. And I've since, mine's gone. Anyway, my symbol that I envisioned, the gift inside of a sealed trunk, evolved over several years. While dreaming, while meditating, and while biking, I'd have these visions, and each time the trunk would be a little bit more open. When I was 43 years old, I made an 8-day silent retreat at the Jesuit Retreat Center in Milford, Ohio. On the second night of my retreat, I had a vivid dream where the trunk was fully open and the bright light shone from the box. When I awoke, I wrote in my journal, "There's a gift inside of me, and I think Chuck knows what it is. Like a lot of gifts, Chuck is letting it sit there. The gift is powerful and everlasting, so there's no need to protect it or spare it. It is a gift from God. It's God's light, God's love, and God's truth. It is totally unconditional, but Chuck has to open it. God won't force it." When I read the dream to my spiritual director, I wept. While living above Nighttown, there were at least 3 trips that I can remember. Maybe my kids can remember more, I don't know. There were 2 trips with my sons in canoe. Oh yeah, look at those guys. I'm on the top far left. Yeah. Eat your heart out, Gavin. One Jeep trip to California across the Devil's Highway. A Jeep trip with my son Christopher up to Hudson's Bay, Canada. Oh, you know, I didn't even show you the map of. I did, but I didn't comment on it. Anyway, this is Christopher and I. Let me read the 2 canoe trips. The trip to Hudson's Bay was a 4-day trip to Christopher and I took in conjunction with our annual Canadian trip. That's on the way up to Hudson's Bay. It was May, and you can see there was still snow on the ground. And look at that teepee. Yeah, it was populated with Cree Indians. Radisson, the town, is really quite amazing. It's like the towns that they built to build the Alaskan pipeline. This town was built primarily to house the workers on this power line, this huge power line. Anyway, I don't have a picture of the power line. Well, maybe there was before. This trip to Hudson's Bay was a 4-day trip, and it was in conjunction with our Canadian Woods Victoria Day holiday weekend. We have done this trip annually for 45 years. My three brothers, our sons, and I go the third weekend in May to fish and open the cottage. Yeah, those are the fish. Yeah, the little guy there. The fish was bigger than he was. He won the prize. I remember that year. After 8.5 years, I moved out of Nighttown. Now we're in 2003. Oh, God, look at this. I moved into a two-family house. Shortly after moving into a two-family house, I took 2 other trips. I drove my Jeep across the country to California to pick up my son Alex, who was having a job interview in Los Angeles. I picked up Alex and connected with his nephew, my nephew, his cousin, and drove back to Cleveland. This was a fun trip. On the way out to pick Alex up, I dropped down to southern Arizona and crossed the Devil's Highway, which is only about 120 miles, but it took 10 to 12 hours. I still can't find it. Don Palmer's trying to help me, and it's lost. It's just a trail. Anyway, you had to go through a checkpoint, get permission. Anyway, this is good because I camped in the desert, and is there a picture of my tent? Oh yeah, no. Here, the bottom picture is the picture of the Jeep. I'm taking that picture from my tent. Yeah, and I'm stoned. I've been smoking, and I'm stoned. And I was told T this. She says, I get it. But I had some cookies left in the Jeep, and I was stuck in the tent. And the wind was so strong that I couldn't get out of the tent or it would blow away. So I kept, anyway. The second trip was a 5,000-mile trip that Alex and I took up to Newfoundland. Look at those guys. Yeah. We did this on motorcycles. And one of the few times I felt fear when my brother David went down the rapids in a canoe. But this was really fearful. Alex and I drove all over Newfoundland, but on one day we drove all the way from St. John's, which is the capital on the east coast, over to Herbruck, which is a town on the west coast. It's about 300 miles, and we did it in pouring rain. And it wasn't a problem for Alex, but for me, I was scared to death. I was just seconds away from, anyway. Now we got life with Brenda. Ta-da! I was 56 years old and 6 months sober when I connected with Brenda. Actually, cannot say that I was sober, but I hadn't had a drink for 6 months. But I had not joined AA or had any counseling. I noticed Brenda in church had noticed for several years. I thought she was very pretty, and I thought she was intriguing. Why do I say intriguing? There was something spiritual about her. There's a picture of Brenda and Jane Morris, her good friend, and I had to touch, they had halos over their head when I first took the picture, and I had to dub them out, you know. I'm sorry. By chance, Brenda and I ended up in a couple of prayer groups and Bible studies together. Finally, I asked her out on a date, and she said, how much does it cost? And where are we going? I have to explain that the group we'd been studying with were actually good friends, and sometimes we did do things together, so it was not totally out of line when she asked this. I said, Brenda, I'm asking you out on a date. And she said, okay. I said, I don't remember if she said it reluctantly or with some enthusiasm. And I honestly don't remember what we did or where we went. I do remember taking her home to her apartment and saying goodnight. It was a little awkward. She smiled and said something like, what do we do now? And she said, oh, maybe you can kiss me on the cheek. What, can you believe it? I still don't. Probably the last, so I did, and the romance had started. About a year and a half later, Alex, who was still living downstairs in the two-family house, asked me if his girlfriend could move in with him. Huh. When I mentioned this to Brenda, she said, I get to move in before she does. Right, Tracy? Yeah. Brenda moved in and Alex moved out and got married. There we are, Alex's wedding. We did that up at the cottage. There are a couple memories of those years that we lived in the two-family house. Number one, along with Brenda came her cat Birkenstock, which was the first pet I ever loved. Number two, Brenda fell in love with a feral cat that she had been watching on our garage roof. She named the cat Rose, and soon we had a colony of feral cats living in the garage. This became a problem with the neighbors and eventually with the City Hall. After several meetings with City Hall, we solved it by finding cats' homes. And this sparked Brenda's interest in animal welfare and volunteering at Rescue Village, which is an animal shelter in Geauga County. Thirdly, after about 6 months of living together, she told me I was nothing but a dry drunk. Yeah, she did. I remember we were standing in the kitchen. The scotch and gin were gone, but the anger and depression were still there. I had been to a couple AA meetings and decided that I didn't qualify. This is not an uncommon feeling for new AA members. Anyway, so she suggested I see a counselor that she knew. I did, and he told me to go to AA. So I did, and I still do, and I love it. Whew. I hope you're, I'm sorry this is so long. The fourth and most important thing I remember was getting to know Brenda's daughters. Her younger daughter, Megan, whom I only know through stories Brenda has related, died of leukemia at the age of 23. It still makes me want to weep when I think about it. And her older daughter, Kaylee, who I got to know and love, I think she's one of the finest people I've ever met. That's a picture of Kaylee, who is like Julie Anderson's best friend. You know Julie. Moved to Judson. There we go, folks. 3 years after living in the two-family house, Brenda and I moved into Moreland Courts and lived there for 12 years. We began to think about a place to retire where it would be safe if one of us became ill. After looking at both the park and the manor and other communities, including some in Norfolk, Virginia, where Brenda's daughter Kaylee lives, we ultimately decided to stay at Moreland Courts. Then in July of 2020, while eating dinner, Brenda noticed 2 tremors in my right hand. She said, "We need to see a doctor." The tremors would not have set off an alarm except for the fact that I had been diagnosed with REM behavior disorder 10 years prior. And I knew that people with REM behavior disorder had a high likelihood of developing Parkinson's. 2 years later, after many tests, I was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonisms. Parkinsonisms are Parkinson's symptoms, but they're not really Parkinson's. I'll tell you a little bit about Lewy body. I'm not going to go too much, but it sort of brought me up short. If you pull it up on the internet and read the first paragraph, it tells you the life expectancy of someone with Lewy body is 5 to 7 years from diagnosis. So that, we're all old, and we know we're not going to live forever. But that sort of shocked me. But I'll tell you, there's some interesting, I think they're interesting anyway, symptoms to Lewy body. One is that you have hallucinations. Mine are very mild. 2, it really exacerbates depression and apathy. The apathy is terrible because these are things I want to do but can't do. And another characteristic is, much dementia, your memory is the first thing to go. With Lewy body, it's one of the last things to go. So anyway, that's Lewy body. Due to the Lewy body diagnosis, we moved to Judson Manor. Adjusting to life and living with adjusting to community life and living with Lewy body has had its challenges. But I think I can honestly say that I'm as happy as I've ever been, and I mean that. I have good care from doctors at the clinic, good attention from the staff at Judson, and have made some meaningful friendships with residents and staff. Julie was a tremendous help getting us started. But my primary joy has come from my increased conscious contact with our Creator. I can't express how profound this is for me. Now we're at the end, folks, and I say thank you for your smiles, your support, your idiosyncrasies that make me laugh, make my life full. And I'd like just to repeat my 4 themes, but I'm going to add a 5th one, and I'm going to read one more thing. The 5th thing, and I brought copies of this for anyone who might want a copy. It's a poem by Hafiz. He's a 14th century Persian mystic who my good friend Max and I talked about when we worked together. Max sitting over there, I think. He's still there. Yeah. Anyway, Hafiz, the name of the title, oh, there it is. I have learned so much. I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even pure soul. Love has befriended Hafiz so completely it has turned into ash and freed me of any concept and image my mind has ever known. It all simply is, folks, and we're all one. And, I think I got a couple more things, but I'm not going to read them. Oh, and seriously, there's 2 things back on the back tape. Oh, or 3 things. 1, there's cake. And 2, there's a little sign that says, be kind. Always be kind to everybody. We don't know the fight that they're fighting. Yeah, thank you, Karen. We don't. And then the other one is a copy of that poem, because I don't know if you can get it right away, but it's really, I think, a masterful, deep thought. Thank you so much for everything, folks. Thank you, Gavin.